as you can see here, to be cut off, to be separated, to become pure or sacred. This separated quality is probably the basic meaning of the Hebrew word kadosh, much like the English word distinguished, which can mean both separate and special. Kadosh begins by meaning separate and ends by meaning special or sacred or holy or elevated. We're going to dig into this in a minute, but just to point out a few ways in which the word kadosh, the root of the word, if you remember, all Hebrew words have a three-letter root system. And so if you look at the root of Kuf Daled Shin, you have here three words that are connected to this idea of holy, right? We have the Mikdash, which is a name for our holy place, right? A holy place that is separate and different from normal and mundane places. We have Hekdesh, which is an animal or other item that has been separated from everything else, designated for a special purpose in the Mishkan, in the temple. And then on Friday night, tonight, when we will do Kiddush, Kiddush, how we mark Shabbat and holidays as being special and separate from the rest of the week. So let's stop right there with this idea of holiness as something separate or distinct. Does that resonate with you? Does that seem to go against the usual way in which we understand holiness? If you had to define holiness, would this be the way in which you would define holiness, as something that is distinct or separate? Or are there other definitions that you think of, or other ways in which we should be thinking about this concept of holiness? No, everyone is bought in. No other concepts of holiness. Yes, Susan.
Well, initially, I was when I heard this at first, I was taken aback, and I thought, because my normal thought of holiness is a little bit above the mundane, but being above the mundane is also separate from the mundane, and I've come to appreciate that. And separate not only from the mundane, but we're also separate in many ways from other societies and cultures, and we're connected, but we're also separate from them, leading our own path. So I happen to like it now, because not everyone can be above everything else, supra and super, but one can separate oneself. It's more easily achievable, let's say, and if we concentrate on that. So I happen to like it now.
Okay, good. So you've moved from the idea of holiness being something above, better than, almost unattainable in its quality. And what you like about the Jewish definition, at the core definition of what holiness is that it makes it a little bit more realistic and attainable, and it actually gives almost a democratic element to holiness, that anyone has the possibility of moving into this distinct, separate place, as opposed to seeing it as something only accessible to very few, or those who have a certain skill set or whatever else. Okay, great. But generally, I think most people probably do start with that same feeling that you had, Susan, of holiness, seeing it as something that is mostly unattainable, and something for a small group of people. Jonathan. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Jonathan.
I was kind of thinking that while the root is separate or unique, it may be, or I'm wondering if it did sort of grammaticalize over time to just also take on the meaning of like God or like the divine. And so, because I mean, I guess if we want to be separate, it says be holy because I'm holy. So like, if we want to be separate, it doesn't mean just being different from everybody, I mean, Pee Wee Herman was different from everybody, but he didn't really offer a whole lot to, the world at large. So as one thing is, we do tend to think of holiness as something that's unattainable, because we do tend to think of it so much as like, I have to be like God, that we do lose the fact that the core of it really is about being separate and different and distinct. But we also do kind of want to keep in the back of our mind that we are actually aiming to be like God in certain ways as well. So we don't want to forget. We don't want to get lost in that divinity aspect of it and afraid of it, but we don't want to forget about it either. You know.
Great. It's a great point, Jonathan. You're right. The distinction and separation is not purely for the fact of being different or distinct from something else. It's a purposeful distinction. It's a distinction with guidance towards something that we may not be able to attain the ultimate, which is to be God. But there's a motivation behind what it means. That the holiness is a motivated drive for separation or distinction, right? Not just to differentiate for the mere fact of showing that people are different or everyone is different or I'm different from this, right? There's some momentum behind it. Douglas and then Ellen. Well, it's not Ellen.
At the risk of oversimplifying this, I think of just obeying the laws and being a nice person. You know, I struggle a lot with a lot of these words, spiritual words that, have, you can't really put your finger on. And so I try to oversimplify it and make it something that I can understand. So I just try to live by those positive attributes. And, one of my main ones since I'm retired is, I can't do a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, not retired, but physically unable. Is just to go around smiling and saying hello to a lot of people. I figure that if I just, make somebody else react in a positive way. A long time ago, when I was riding my bike, I used to get above the 5 freeway and wave to people. And, I'm thinking of, I live in Bakersfield. And so, these people are driving from LA to San Francisco. And I figure, give them a laugh. Look at that crazy guy up there. They got something to talk about. Anyway, that's it.
I love that. Compared to the banners that have made their way onto overpasses, if everyone were to line those overpasses and just wave, could you imagine what the impact would be? Be pretty substantial, actually. So I actually think, Douglas, you make the Torah's point, which is holiness is not supposed to be something that is highfalutin and a concept that we can't connect to, which is why once this phrase is stated at the beginning of the Torah portion, the whole Torah portion is followed by things, the Torah's version of just smile at people, right? Mm-hmm. Your neighbor it's a little bit more complex in terms of what we're supposed to do than just smile, but it is about how do you make actionable this concept of holiness? That if we were to keep it just as a philosophical concept and we don't find actionable ways of living it out, then it's actually useless and meaningless. That many things, and I would say many of what our tradition does, is to try and make our concepts actionable. That's why the Shema is followed by Ve'ahavta, and why Ve'ahavta, which all of our kids learn for B'nai Mitzvah, is all about the actions you take to express your love. It's about a prayer of expressing love for God. How do we express our love? It's through our actions. It's by putting on tefillin. It's by putting mezuzahs on the door. It's by teaching our children and the next generation when you get up, when you lie down, right? If you think about the words that are used in the Ve'ahavta, it's about this concept of love, which can be very abstract, and we find ways of making it actionable. And Judaism is very much about the actions. We take the power of words and we have to find ways of transforming those words into ways in which we can change ourselves, others, or the world in which we live. Brad. Oh, sorry. Actually, Ellen, remind me what it's not Ellen.
Yeah, remind me who you are. Mark. I'm Mark. I'm Ellen's husband.
Yes, Mark.
Ellen is out, and so I thought I would listen in. I used to go to Rabbi Leaders in person Torah studies, which were really terrific. I agree with Douglas completely. I don't view holiness as trying to obtain godlike stature. I view holiness as being good, being maybe special, maybe helping people in around, and And now that I'm retired, I have more time to try to do that. It's not it's not an unattainable goal, as maybe being like God. It's a readily human attainable goal by doing little things like Douglas said, making people smile when you walk down the street, or helping your neighbor with a problem that the neighbor has, or taking them to an appointment that they have. It's just being good and maybe special. It's interesting though that I'd never thought about it as being separate, but I totally get the double meaning, about being separate and being whole and being good. But I don't emphasize the separate part. I actually like to be part of the community, and being a good person in a community, I think, is holy. That's how I.
Great. I love that, Mark. I would just say, you say just to be a good person. I think we can't take that part for granted. Like there's almost a minimizing of just, well, all it is just being a good person. I actually think that's actually much harder than we give it credit for, right? And so it's not just that we should just be a good person. I think your concept at its core is the most basic of human interactions in the way in which we treat people are the avenue to holiness. Unfortunately, in today's world, we sometimes lose track of some of those basic ways in which we should be engaging in the world. And so, yes, some of us may take it for granted, but our tradition also seems to recognize, because yes, of course, you shouldn't place a stumbling block before the blind. You should express love. You shouldn't cheat people. These are things that we kind of know we shouldn't do, and yet it seems to be very difficult over the course of time for people to do these things. So I just don't want to minimize what I agree with what you're saying is being holy is just be a good person, and it's just be a good person, right? So I think it's almost, we just have to reframe the emphasis and the importance of some of these basic norms that are no longer, unfortunately, necessarily basic for many people. But thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. Penina and then Brad. Nope.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I would say that this is a state of mind. You need object. That's why they give you the cup of wine. They give you to remind you. And then you entering a different state of mind than, for example, when the Shabbat comes. This is a point of separation. This is what makes us different from other nations. So that's why that state of mind, this is what you call being kadosh. You entering that special thing that's ours or yours, like the Shabbat, which is amazing example. So the cup of wine, all this ritual thing, you go to shul, all this, and you enter into that state of mind that makes you who you are and what you are. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that holiness is not just actions. In your case, Penina, what you're talking about is a distinction and separation of our mindset, right? That we have to, that part of
the speciality of our Shabbat.
Yeah.
What makes it ours and what makes it who we are. So that's it. It's a state of mind.
Thank you. Brad.
Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, one of the items here is, for example, separating fabrics, not mixing a wool and linen. I get separation in that context. But when you apply it to people, to me, it seems exactly the opposite of what we should be looking for. We should be looking for that I-thou relationship. We should be looking for belonging to a community. Loneliness is a plight facing so many people today. So I don't understand how separation is a good thing. when we're talking about people?
It's a choice.
Well, I don't know if it's, Brad, about separating yourself. Now, maybe that's more of a conversation when it comes to the concept of chosenness. But when it comes to holiness, the first line that we looked at from this Torah portion is, you shall be holy, meaning everyone. It's not distinguishing even between the types of people who could become holy, saying only the priests can do this or only X or Y. There is a democratic idea behind holiness that everyone has that potential, that the separation that you're referring to of separating people, either holy people or not holy people, or either distinguishing between those who have opportunity or not. I don't know which one you're kind of referring to, but the texts itself isn't trying to separate people per se. It's actually supposed to elevate every person and to actually elevate the way in which we interact and build relationships with other people. That it's actually the ways in which we have divided and separated people that the Torah is fighting against, right? It fights against, in the Torah portion, against those who are wealthy and those who are poor, and the benefits that some wealthy may get over the poor, or vice versa, how you judge people. Whether or not someone who is able-bodied, if you want to take it at face value, the idea of don't place a stumbling block before the blind, on one level is, of course, about do not put barriers in front of those who physically are not able to do certain things. And on the deeper level, it's about, why are you creating barriers to people's success, right? We should not create barriers to people's success. So actually, I think that the Torah seems to be pushing us more towards not separating and actually finding ways in which we can live together and give everyone the opportunity to bolster themselves towards more holiness. That would be my response, Brad. Hold on, Pina, yeah, Brad, does that help?
I mean, I if you look at the items individually, I get it. I get that about the blind and about the deaf, etc. I'm just not seeing how those are examples of separation. Maybe I'm struggling just with the concept of separation.
Okay. Well, let's come back to that then. Let's see, as we go through the study, and see if anything else helps explain that better. And if not, we'll come back to it later on in the study. I want to give David a chance since he hasn't talked yet, and then Jonathan.
Is it possible that separate means just self-aware or aware? Because if you're not separate, you're not distinguishing what you're doing and what's going on. Everything in the world is the same. And maybe that's what the word separate means. Be conscious of what you're doing, and therefore you'll achieve these purposes better.
Great. Yeah, and that kind of goes along the lines of what Panina was saying. It's a mindset, right? It's also, if you think about Shabbat, what distinguishes Shabbat, that when we do Kiddush, that is supposed to switch our mindset into, we've had a certain way in which we've done things for 6 days out of the week, and now we have to take on a different approach to the world and our place within it. And so it's the separating kind of a mindset in that way. Okay, we'll come back to it though. Jonathan.
Okay, so I just wanted to say I'm still learning everybody's names, but I got an idea from the guy who was talking about holiness as basically just being good, and the guy who was talking about his problems with the distinction or separation aspect of it is that it's not necessarily being like separated in every way, physically or in every aspect, but in being different, or in having like a different nature than the world at large that doesn't know God or try to serve God or try to spread God's nature. So then if you actually are standing on the overpass, waving at everybody, sending out good vibes, you're actually going to be very different from most people. Most people wouldn't do that. They really only look out for their close friends when they're in a good mood, and so on and so forth. So the idea of being a good person and spreading love and being more like God is really intrinsically related to being a good person. That's sort of like the key to linking the concepts together.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. All right, let's keep going with the text. Oh, Rebecca, before I go to that text.
I just want to say that, and now I don't know a lot about a lot of different world religions, but what separates us from other religions, even though I don't know a lot about other religions, is our covenant. It's the covenant that we have with God that makes us unique and which makes us a little bit separated, I guess. Does that make sense, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely, Rebecca. I get that, but yeah, I don't know how to respond. I mean, I think there seems to be a pull back and forth within Judaism between the idea of being separate, being in that covenantal relationship on the one hand, which separates us from others, and then on the other hand, another pull to be in a community or to be in that that I thou relationship with others, with the neighbor who may not necessarily be one of us, for example. So it's there seem to be two different directions. We're pulled in two different ways, it seems.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes, we are. That is a great way of describing it. Well, like all things Jewish, we are pulled in multiple directions with multiple challenges and opportunities. And there's both the value of being distinct and separate, and the value of being a part of something bigger. And there are responsibilities that cross those together and bring those together, and there are certain responsibilities that come in each of those categories on their own, right? And so our tradition is constantly, the way I see it, is trying to find that balance between those dual responsibilities. And again, this concept of balance is so key to what our tradition does. And does so also with Shabbat. I want us to keep going a little, so we get a little further. Maybe we'll get through at least page 1. Okay, so we already saw this. I already kind of explained this, so we'll get. So moving into this concept of Shabbat, which has come up a few times. And the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work which he had made, and God rested on the seventh day from all his work which God had made. And God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, made it holy. Word right here, again, that same root. Because that in it, God stopped from all God's work which God in creating had made. Okay, so this is not just the first mention of Shabbat in the Torah, it's also the first occurrence of the word kadosh, or holiness. And holiness here and throughout the Torah is defined by that act of stopping. Before we can discover the holiness within ourselves, says Rabbi Ullman, we must first imitate God and stop. Right? This whole idea of, he seems to be suggesting that Shabbat is not only a separation from Shabbat from the rest of the week, but we're supposed to mirror this concept of stopping, of kind of taking a moment to reevaluate. Again, going to this idea of not just the action piece of what it means to be holy, but also the mindset of taking the time to really reflect and be intentional about who we are and what we want to accomplish in the world and what it means to be holy for us. And then Heschel's famous passage from his great book, The Sabbath. Judaism teaches us to be attached to holiness in time, to be attached to sacred events, to learn how to consecrate sanctuaries that emerge from the magnificent stream of a year. The Sabbaths are our great cathedrals, and our Holy of Holies is a shrine that neither the Romans nor the Germans were able to burn. The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to holiness and time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. Okay? Any thoughts, comments on this part about Shabbat, which is kind of the ultimate framework of holiness, and what our tradition tries, I think, to do is blend those two worlds of distinction and separation, both through action and mindset, and that we have a responsibility on both levels, and that if again, the power of Shabbat and why it's probably one of the best inventions of all time is because it has allowed the Jewish people, and if we look now at secular society as well, an opportunity to just kind of shift out of a 24/7 grind into some distinction between days of the week and ideally mindsets. Ben.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I think kind of what you were just saying, that the Shabbat gives us a chance to separate the days or the weeks, to be a little thoughtful. And I think that's part of the Jewish experience for me, is studying and learning and always open, as opposed to just do and just keep go, but to take a moment to have a break and reflective for that day, and maybe we will do things better in the future and not making the same mistakes by having that moment to reflect.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like built into Shabbat. The whole part of the holiness of Shabbat is the holiness of reflection, the value of reflection, the value of taking personal inventory on where we are in our own lives and our place in the world. That alone in itself, maybe there's an element of holiness in that, because that is a distinction between just kind of going through the motions of life and taking the time to actually reflect on who we are and where we are in the world and in our own life. Okay, keep going here. When we do a Jewish wedding, Hare at mekudeshet li b'taba'at zo kadat Moshe v'Yisrael. Right? Again, the word shows up here. With this ring, as we say, the way I do it, with this ring you are consecrated to me, you are made holy to me, according to the laws of Moses and the people of Israel. Right? So built in, again, a distinguishing moment with a ritual of the exchanging of rings and the sharing of a phrase that says, we are now distinct and distinguished. So it's not just me personally that becomes distinguished from the world, but now there are groups of people, or in this case, a relationship that can be separate and unique. A holy relationship is a relationship that is unique and distinct from all other kinds of relationships that you may have. It's not limited to a wedding or to marriage. It can be a friendship. It can be the type of relationship between a child and a parent, right? There are these ways in which not only are my actions holy, but my relationships can be holy. And how we're supposed to understand that idea of creating holy relationships, that again, what makes them holy is that they are distinct and separate, that there are unique identifiers to that relationship, unique identifying responsibilities or values that distinguish that from other relationships. Doesn't make it better. Again, it's just a way in which we distinguish and differentiate, and how important that is in our tradition. We are very much about distinction and differentiation. And that's today not how we like to see. Like, the world seems to be pushing everyone should be closer and the same, or we're all linked. Yes, we are all linked and we're distinct. We have to maintain that distinction and separation. And then again, like the blessing, this is the blessing that we offered when we first started this session, which we start every study session, but has the phrase built into it anytime we offer a blessing, which is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu. Again, right there, that holiness is built into the framework of every single blessing that we offer. And again, what does a blessing do? A blessing is supposed to distinguish this moment, this action, from the mundane, non-blessed moments of our life. And that's the reason why we're supposed to offer so many blessings during a day. Traditionally, the rabbis say 100 blessings a day, right? And if you were to do that, what you are doing is you are distinguishing certain moments of your day from everything else, and there is value in that distinction. There's value in creating, even if it's momentary, a momentary distinction and separation of what you are experiencing in this moment from everything else. Because as soon as you do that, you give it power, you give it an identity, and it's not anonymous. And you could potentially recall it later on in your day or in your week or your month or your year, right? So then it becomes something that is held as having value. And our tradition is very much about trying to find as many value points as possible, because the more we feel value in the world around us and in our actions, I believe then that carries again with it a responsibility we have to continue to add that value to the world. So it goes back to this responsibility that we have to the greater world. Distinguishing these moments forces us to recognize that we have gained value, we have received value from the world, and therefore we have an obligation and a responsibility to add value back into the world as well. Any comments, thoughts so far? Okay. Rabbi Harvey Fields, of blessed memory, who is the senior rabbi here at Wilshire Boulevard Temple. He has this commentary on Leviticus Rabbah, which is Midrash, rabbinic Midrash, storytelling. Rabbi Hia, who lived in Israel during the 3rd century, stresses that Moses was told to present the commandment, "You shall be holy, for I, the eternal your God, am holy," to the whole Israelite community. The commandment was given not to a few pious priests or individuals, but rather to the entire community. Achieving the state of holiness, therefore, is not something done by one person or a small group of persons, but rather by the whole people. And then Martin Buber, who is the creator of the concept of I, thou, and I, it that Brad was referring to earlier. Israel must, in imitating God by being a holy nation, similarly not withdraw from the world of the nations, but rather radiate a positive influence on them through every aspect of Jewish living. Okay, so this maybe goes possibly to what Brad was bringing up earlier about, well, separating people out or distinguishing ourselves. Martin Buber is saying, no, actually, by imitating God, by being a holy nation, not just me individually, but we collectively, that doesn't mean we separate ourselves from the world. If anything, we need to use that intentionality to guide the world. And finally, well, a couple more, and then we'll get some comments. To be holy means not merely in the privacy of your home and ashamed of your faith in public. Be not, as the assimilationists put it, a Jew at home and a man outside. Be holy in community, in public, out in the open, in society, among your own people or in the midst of strangers, wherever you may find yourself. Never be ashamed of your character and sanctity as a Jew. Right, so now Chaim Sofer is pushing a little further than just be a good person. It's almost to say, when you are out in the community, make it clear that the reason you are being a good person or you are doing what you're doing or waving from the overpass is because you're Jewish, right? So he would say, take ownership over the fact that the good deeds that you do and the way you act in the world, at least the positive ones, are based on the fact that you are Jewish and based on this concept from this week's Torah portion of we have a responsibility to try and be holy and therefore own your values and own your Jewish identity as the key piece of why you do what you do, which is curious what people think about that. Let's pause there. What do people think about this idea? You know, in today's, ever since October 7th, there have been people who felt, understandably, that this is not the time to publicly display not just signs of Judaism, whether it's a mezuzah on their door or their Jewish star, but that it doesn't feel safe to be Jewish right now, or to be overtly Jewish, or let alone to talk about what it means for you to be Jewish. So I'm curious, Chaim Sofer, Rabbi Sofer is suggesting, no, everything that you do, you should see, not necessarily always articulate I'm doing this because I'm Jewish, but to not shy away from that being a key piece of the conversation as to when you make important decisions of saying, no, my value system as a Jew has led me to do this. Cindy.
Yeah, generally, I completely agree with you and being proud of Jewish and outward, but just thinking what the college kids are going through now, where if they even wear a Jewish star walking on campus, they'll be accosted, and just how sad it is for them to be going through this.
Yeah, yes. And what we're seeing on these college campuses right now, and unfortunately now seems to be leaking into some high schools in the country too, is this fervent either anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, however you want to describe it, is again part of this history that we've dealt with for so long of people.
And they don't condemn Hamas at all. It's just the Jews in Israel.
Right. So how are we in a place where we don't feel safe? Is that the time where we have to declare our Jewish identity, or do we need to protect ourselves? Right. And that's a constant challenge that we're facing right now. Merle.
I was just going to say our 13-year-old granddaughter was accosted at the Susan G. Komen 3-Day in San Diego when some walker saw her wearing the tiniest Jewish star you can imagine that he happened to have seen. And the Komen people handled it well, and it's not stopping her from going back next year. But I think that whatever we do, I don't know how to say it right, but whatever we do, we have to show not who we are by just wearing a Star of David or wearing a t-shirt or whatever, but I think we have to show who we are by doing good and showing that we are making the effort to do the appropriate things and not let people hit us in the face with it. It's hard. And sometimes you just have to walk around and keep your mouth shut, or your actions not being shown. But it's important that we live accordingly so that we are doing the right things and teach our kids and grandchildren and I look at our friends that proclaim to be so Jewish that don't even support a synagogue. They can't be bothered. And, what are they teaching their families or their friends who are along with them? They think we're crazy, that we support our Judaism in so many ways.
Thanks, Merle. Other thoughts on this idea, either of overt identification of being a Jew and our values, or anything else that we read so far? And keep going. Okay, we'll keep going. If a person can protest a wrongdoing of another and does not, or if he can help support students of Torah and does not, such a person is not considered holy. Seems like Merle may have written this. But if a person does protest the wrongdoing of others and does support students of Torah, that person attains holiness. All right, so here this seems to be more action-based, and that there is a responsibility, according to Rabbi Aha and Leviticus Rabbah, that if you have the opportunity to protest something or to speak out against something and you don't, or if you have the means by which you can help support, in this case, students of Torah means Jewish learning, Jewish education, and you don't, then you're not holy. But if you do protest, if you do stand up and use your voice, and you do put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, then you can attain holiness. Ben, you have thoughts on this?
I do, Rabbi. Thank you. And just thinking, I guess I was alive in the 60s, maybe not as active, but the role that the Jews in general took speaking out against the wrongs for civil rights, or the rights of civil rights, and marching and all those things. So they were following those principles of speaking out against wrong. But then fast forward to today, I know we've talked a little bit about today, where so many of the people that the Jews in general spoke up for are now not joining hands with the Jews and speaking up for us in these times. So it's interesting that here we have this guidance from God in the Torah, but interesting how it hasn't really paid off so much. I know I'm looking at one little isolated piece of it, but challenging.
It is challenging, right? And in some ways, maybe it's this brutal reminder that we are always going to be alone in some respects, right? That's one pessimistic view of seeing it. Which isn't necessarily supposed to diminish our obligation to helping others, because our Torah doesn't say, as long as people got your back, you can get theirs. You know, if things are working out well for you and people are good, then good, you know, take care of them. And if they don't, forget them. There aren't those kind of it's not that framing in the Torah. It's almost like and this is the burden part of being Jewish. The burden we have is that we have a certain moral compass and obligation that is incumbent upon us regardless of what we get in return. Now, again, if people try and kill us, etc., right? And the Torah says you have to protect yourself. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about similarly when we as Jews have expected something in return. Unfortunately, history shows that we don't mostly get what we expect. What we can expect is our resilience and our obligation to continue moving forward with strength and fortitude and hope that things will change, right? But not the expectation that things will change. And that, I think, is the burden piece. That's the mentality of seeing this as a burden. That as soon as we start to, it's the same when you look at tzedakah and the levels of tzedakah from Maimonides and this idea of giving charity, and that even the person in the community who is poor has an obligation to give. That we are very much about, you know, this is not about what you get in return. This is we have responsibilities that we must do regardless, and that's hard, and that's not necessarily always easy for us to do. But there is that element that I think does creep into our tradition as well. Penina. Oh, yep. Brad, Penina, and then Brad. You're muted, Penina. You're muted. Can't hear you. We'll come back to you, Penina, because we can't hear you. All right. I feel bad, but Brad, go ahead, and hopefully.
Yeah, Rabbi, I think that passage just epitomizes the contradiction that I'm seeing, because on the one hand, it's talking to humanity. The first part of that, if somebody is in, I don't remember the exact words, but in need, or what is that?
A person can
protest the wrongdoings of another. That other could be anybody, Jew, not Jew. But yet the second part of that statement is the supporting the Torah, which is obviously directed at the Jewish community. So it's this separated but not separated, but separated but not separated. It's this, yes, we're part of this larger world, and as Ben just talked about, our involvement in civil rights, for example, yet on the other hand, being part of a more limited community of our peers.
Yep. Thank you, Penina.
And it's right there in that one statement.
Yes.
It encapsulates both.
Yes. Thank you.
I tried to say something before, but I think I was muted.
You were muted.
I said that
now
I think we should be also very knowledgeable of what it is that we are deserve to have or entitled to have before we start playing the poor little me and or blaming other people, the wrong people, for what it is that's really whoever is supposed to take responsibility. What I'm trying to tell you is, for example, a nation that wins a part of a land that before that they did not own, but they win it in a war that didn't start, like what happened with Germany during World War II, that it was Russia had half of it or whatever. No other nation is required to give it back if it was won in a war that they didn't start. But Israel is always in demand that to give back territory that they won in wars that they did not start. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. So I don't feel ashamed or weak when recognizing that things are happening that we didn't actually did it. So we can't always accept ourselves that we weren't holy, or we weren't good enough, or we're not smart enough. Sometimes you have to actually maybe, I don't know, I always think of sandpaper. You gotta be a little rough sometimes and clean it up like sandpaper. And it should be, first of all, in our mind, and not always be the victim. You have a choice. You can vote. Do it in a way that should benefit what you think it's really yours. This is it. Simple as that. Okay.
Thank you.
All.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right. We're going to look at one final text since we're out of time. Holiness is arrived at when one lives life in its fullest dimensions, when one experiences the physical and the spiritual in interaction with each other. When I meet another person and interact casually, even if I treat them honestly and respectfully, I am living properly. But when I deepen the exchange into a relationship, into caring and loving the other, then I get to know them in depth as an image of God. I experience them not just as another person, but as a wondrous creature that is of infinite value, equal and unique. This is a moment of holy encounter. Then, if I go deeper, on and through and beyond meeting the other, I encounter the divine medium, the God in which the image is rooted. This too is the experience of holiness. So Rabbi Greenberg is kind of just talking about these various levels of holiness. It's not even just one level, but that going deeper and deeper into relationship, going back to Martin Buber and the idea of I, thou, and when we engage in the world and in relationships, that's where we find holiness. The holiness code in Kiddushim is very much about all these interactions that we have with other people and the world around us. It's not just about what I do by myself. That holiness in our tradition is very much about being in the world, being in relationship, and that it's in those distinctions and how we distinguish those relationships from others, how we distinguish ourselves in certain situations, and how we as a people can distinguish ourselves as people who continually strive to be the best we can be with a moral compass. That's how we bring more and more holiness into the world. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
thoughts and
Thank
comments.
you.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.